This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad and live today. Imagine, if you will, a time in your life when things weren't just good, but they were great. A time when you were riding high and nothing could stop you. Nothing could go wrong. All the stars were aligned properly and Lady Luck was on your side. All that bad stuff that's happened in your life up to that point, it didn't matter one bit because the good outweighed the bad. These are moments and memories that we like to call the good old days. Now, it's fun to think back and relive a certain success at work, an innocent moment as a child, a victory on the field, a social outing with friends, a health scare turned around, a vacation to an exotic locale, a school project that went absolutely flawless, or even a date with someone who was totally out of your league. We think back on these moments of perfection in our heads and we pine for the good old days. Days when the bad and messy things of life were just kind of glossed on over as if they did not exist. Now, the funny thing with our memories is that we remember the important things we wish to remember, and then we just discard all the rest. If you were to ask me what I had for dinner last Sunday night, I undoubtedly would struggle to answer that question. Now, this does not reflect on the quality of food I ate. It's just that remembering this particular experience isn't one of my top priorities as I take time to eat every day. But you ask me about the birth of my children, I can start rattling off those details, from the time of day to what I was wearing, who the nurses were, and which friends decided to stop by and visit, and even the first meal I ate after each child was born. Remembering important events. It's nothing new, for the early Jews remembered with vivid detail a big moment in their own history, that being their people's deliverance from Pharaoh in Egypt. Having been enslaved, then freed by God through Moses and Aaron, this particular event was the single most important thing to happen to their ancestors. So they committed all the details to memory. Each of the 10 plagues, all of that's included in the Passover meal, the flight from Pharaoh, the crossing of the Red Sea, the manna in the wilderness, receiving God's law on Mount Sinai, the 40 years of wandering in what seemed to be endless circles, and the eventual arrival in the Promised Land. These were the good old days to the Israelites, and they remembered them with fondness, how God was present with them through the ups and downs, the mountains, the valleys, in good times and bad, through thick and thin. So it's no wonder that when things get bad, the Israelites turn to this particular moment in history and they cling to it tighter than bark to a tree. In our reading from Isaiah, things have gotten pretty bad for the Israelites, and they do hearken back to these good old days. The people find themselves in exile in Babylon, a foreign country not their own, and they think back to the Exodus and think back to their deliverance by God. This is what they hold on to. But the prophet Isaiah has other words for them. He says that yes, it is important to remember the past, but we can't live back in the past either. Isaiah quotes the Lord as saying, "Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" God is not going to rework the past in order to make our present acceptable for a bright future. God is about doing new things, pointing forward to the future to reveal the handiwork that He has in store for us. So you like that Exodus story, huh? Well, God's got a new one for you, and He promises to deliver His people once again through a new Exodus as they return back to the land that they were previously in before their captivity. And more importantly, this new thing done by God, it will be a sign to the people that God has not left them, and He will never leave them. Not now. Not ever. This journey that we find ourselves on during this Lenten season, it's kind of like our own Exodus story, if you will. We are bound by our own sinfulness, which restricts us from carrying the gospel message out into the world. But even in simplest of terms, our sinfulness restricts us from having a meaningful relationship with God. We cannot escape this land of darkness and greed and self-centeredness on our own. We need Christ to break our chains and to lead us forth into the light of a new day, a day that's filled with hope and with promise and never failing love. Jesus comes to set us free so that we might experience the land of milk and honey, the land of opportunity, the land of whatever you want to call it. He allows our eyes to be open to the fact that God didn't just work back in the past during those good old days, but He's present in the here and now, blessing us and promising to remain faithful to His people forever. Are we able to put our trust in God's faithfulness, that He will make all things new for us? Well, Mary certainly was able to do this. In our gospel for today, she anoints Jesus' feet with a costly perfume that Jesus said she bought so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. Now, was Mary aware of Jesus' role in God's salvation plan for us? I don't know, maybe so. She definitely is anticipating His imminent death. She also witnessed Jesus raising her brother Lazarus from the dead. Was that enough to create belief and faith that Jesus would follow a similar path of resurrection? I don't know. Maybe so. But what we do know and what we do witness is Mary's devotion and her love to this teacher and friend. She's putting her own trust in the fact that whatever might happen in this next week, God is ultimately in control, and that He will make all things new. Now, what looks like in this particular moment in time, what will happen, Mary doesn't really know, but what she does know that she's seen enough to trust that God is capable and willing to do some pretty brilliant and magnificent things. And if this is the nature that He has, then surely she's ready to be led down His pathways. So the questions for us today are, where are we putting all our energy? In whom do we place our trust? Where do we find hope and encouragement? Well, obviously the answer to that is in Jesus. Jesus makes all things new. He repels down into the canyons and pits in order to retrieve our broken and aching souls. He lifts us up and He propels us to new heights, solidifying our status as God's children who are loved. He backfills those valleys of life with God's love and grace and grants to all who believe the gift of forgiveness and life that is eternal. Jesus makes it possible for us to file those good old days back into our memory banks so that the new memorable possibilities might be created. Through Jesus and through the cross, we are granted a grace and a mercy that is unconditional and without end, spanning both life all the way to death. What this reveals to me is that there is no need for the stars to align or for Lady Luck to be on our side in order to find happiness and comfort. God's love is enough. Certainly, this is something for us to remember. Amen. Remember as you go about your day that yesterday is gone, tomorrow does not yet belong to you. So why not live today, knowing that you never walk alone? See y'all next week. Later.